Okay, hello and welcome to the MSDynamicsWorld.com Spring 2015 CRM webcast series. I'm Jason Gumpert, and we're joined today by Henry McCallum, Senior Dynamics Consultant at Tata Consultancy Services. Henry's a returning speaker for us, and it is always fun to have him with us. Before we get started today, I would just like to take a moment to recognize our CRM series sponsors and thank them for their support of MSDynamicsWorld.com. They are Marketo, PowerObjects, and Scribe Software. So as we get started today, I just want to add that we do invite you to add your feedback and ask questions today. I know that Henry wants to keep today's event conversational and interactive. Please use the Q&A tab, the Q&A block that you should see to the right of the webcast session to ask your questions, and you can even use the chat to add other kinds of feedback that you have. So without further delay, Henry, please take the floor.
Great. How's everyone doing today? Well, I hope. So the goal of today's presentation is to kind of discuss some of the experiences I've had over my 15-plus years of doing CRM, actually 20-plus years doing CRM, and especially my time here with the Microsoft product line. I've done implementations in organizations as small as mom-and-pop fire extinguisher organizations all the way up to multinational financial institutions, aerospace and defense, as well as divisions of the U.S. government. So I've run into many of an odd thing and have seen ways to get around it and have some suggestions to help make the implementation of CRM easier, especially if you're in a large environment or if you're in an environment where you're just starting out and you want to do it correctly from the beginning. That being said, as we all know, Microsoft CRM is not just a boxed application. It is truly a platform-intensive or platform-centric, we might say, product and solution that gives you a framework to do many different things. In order to allow for that functionality, it takes into account a large set of the components out of the Microsoft stack: Active Directory, Internet Information Server, SQL Server, SQL reporting services, as well as .NET technology and things like that. So it really is a complex but actually very simple product to install. Honestly, if you install it by following the rules, and Microsoft has done a pretty good job of providing an implementation guide, you should not see many issues. One of the first things that we're going to talk about is the platform and foundation you configure and set up Dynamics CRM on. Most people that are doing it on-premise or online, most people that are doing it on-premise deal with virtualization or physical hosts. Those of you that are online or going to CRM Online, I'll be honest with you, 92% of this conversation or this slideshow and presentation and information is not really going to be important to you. CRM Online handles all of the back-end infrastructure. It is a wonderful solution, easy to set up, cost-effective, but there are some limitations to it. The ability to utilize CRM as part of a data warehouse and pull information out, whether it's using CRM as a front end or as a data source for business intelligence and other systems, is problematic or complex. We'll be doing another series. My next series in this presentation set actually talks about using CRM as a front end for the data universe. So hopefully you'll join us for that one. The other area where there's some concern with CRM Online is the security model. Microsoft has done a wonderful job with building out Dynamics CRM's online security model and their hosting structure and all of that. There's still an inherent issue that people have with having their data in the cloud. So that's a catch-22. And then the third thing is that CRM Online produces a spring release each year that you can delay the upgrade to that release by a few months, but eventually you're going to have to upgrade to that. So if you've invested any time and money in some functionality that may not work in that, or a new feature set that you don't want to expose your users to, CRM Online can be problematic. that also has problems with CRM Online when it comes to custom application development. It is possible to do things out in the Azure cloud and work with CRM, but again, that takes the simplicity and ease of CRM Online, and that's the complexity that is easily resolved by going forth with a CRM on-premise environment. On-premise environments for CRM, of course, we have labor costs and architecture costs and other costs associated with maintaining server sets and networking technologies. So you have to really identify in your organization what's the benefits, where do I need to go, and honestly, choose the right one, knowing that at any point in time you can move from one to the other. It does take a licensing change and some work, but it is a model that can allow for migration between the two. So let's talk about the the on-premise environments and some things that we need to know. So in the current world, you have two different choices when it comes to hosting your own architecture. You can utilize physical devices, lots and lots and lots of servers, or you can utilize virtualization where you have less servers and slice those servers up into smaller pieces. VMware, Microsoft Hyper-V are the two largest contenders. In the real world, in my experience, VMware dominates the market and is in most larger organizations. So my focus right in this conversation piece is going to be more towards the VMware product. All right. So when building out an infrastructure using VMware, there's a couple things to keep in mind. VMware is very, very technical, and it provides for a lot of configuration and ability to modify and change things to get the optimum performance out of either a server host or out of the server child servers. The way it does this is by memory utilization, architecture sharing, and other such things that we won't really get into. But there are a couple things that you need to keep in mind right up front. Because of the way Dynamics CRM functions as both an application front end while utilizing a database back end, as well as sync services and other such things that work sort of in the middle maybe, it's very important that you configure your actual server images correctly. VMware provides a number of server templates. They have a server template for an internet or web-facing server. That is the one recommended that we use for IIS or for the CRM application server. The reason being is that it is performance tuned to work with IIS and actually handle the ability to serve web pages and content out. The second model that is very important that you can use is there's actually a SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server specific actually image that's recommended to use. Now that is a very important thing to do. Barring anything else, if you create virtual servers using VMware, ensure that when you create the image for your SQL Server, as well as your SQL reporting server, and or SQL integration server, and or SQL Analytics server, that you utilize the SQL VMware template. The reason being is the technology behind memory utilization as well as storage utilization are optimized for that type of transactional and highly volatile data system or information. So that is uber important. I can guarantee right now that if anyone on this call is actually using virtualization and we were to go and check to see if their SQL Server is set up correctly on a correct virtualization image, 98% of you would be correct and have done it right because it's easy to realize that you're doing the right thing. If we were to do the same thing to see that your application servers are set up using the right image, that would be something I probably wouldn't want to bet on. I would say probably 50%, just use the standard server template image and not the image for IIS. Actually, they call it application server image. So that's something to keep in mind as you build out new servers. As we build out these servers, one of the things that we want to do is when we build out the CRM application server, it is very important that we make sure that we know what we're doing when it comes to the memory utilization. CRM, if anyone has CRM right now and has used older versions, they may have run into an experience where they see this async process keeps building and building and building and building, and you have to reset the async process because you run out of memory utilization. 8 out of 10 times, that is not an issue with poor performance of the async services in Microsoft, which have been improved in 2015, but it's actually probably an issue with your memory swapping configuration, either between your servers or the host server that they sit on. Very important thing that most people do, and is a good practice, is never exceed the memory of your host server with your child servers. That being said, so if I have 128 gig of memory on my host server and I have 10 servers, I'm doing my math here. Well, let's not do that one. So anyway, the total sum of memory utilization and that is applied or allowed on your host servers, on your child servers, should not exceed that of the host servers. It is possible to do, and it is actually something that VMware used to brag about. The reason being is that a lot of times your servers are not using all their memory. If you go into your desktop and you Alt-Control-Delete and pull up the task manager and go to the memory utilization, you'll realize that you're usually probably using about 30 to 40% of memory. So all the rest of that memory is actually sitting out there. So VMware allows you to swap that memory back and forth. So a couple things to do is to allocate the memory to the full amount on those member servers or child servers, whatever you may call them, but again, not exceeding the total amount of memory on the host server. This is not as much of a problem in Hyper-V. Hyper-V actually handles that a little bit differently. My skill set is not as detailed with Hyper-V, so I can't go into much more than that, but as I was told yesterday by Microsoft people while at the Microsoft office, Hyper-V handles that better. So I'll agree with them because I can't disagree with them at this point because I've not seen any difference. A couple other things to make sure that we do with these application servers. For both a physical or a virtualization host or server that we set up, I'm a strong proponent of setting up dual NICs, or network interface cards. Some people think that's overkill and a waste, especially in virtualization, since we have, in essence, a very large pipe and there's no issues. But the reason I do that, in case for some reason on a large network, one of those NICs is involved in collisions or other such traffic issues due to IP masking issues, duplicate IP addresses being assigned somewhere else by mistake, different things like that. So by setting up a dual NIC, not only do I theoretically increase the potential throughput, but I also set up a bit of fault tolerance that allows me to continue to operate without a sense of potential failure due to somehow or another an IP conflict, network collisions, so on and so forth. I also recommend the same thing on the SQL Server side. Any questions on virtualization at this point?
Not seeing any questions in the queue right now. Folks, you can use the Q&A block on the right.
Cool. All right. Next area I want to talk about real quick is a couple of things out there in architecture. And if you see, the way I'm building this presentation is I'm building up, setting the foundation, doing the implementation or pre-implementation, and then moving into the implementation stages. So, load balancers. Microsoft provides the ability to do load balancing through the Microsoft operating systems. I think from 2000, I think it was, well, NT, I'm not sure what versions, but anyway, the current versions are all able to do load balancing on their own. The other thing is, okay, I just saw a question, sorry, I got sidetracked by the question there. There's different ways of setting that up, whether you want to just deal with fault tolerance between the servers. So if you have two front ends or two CRM servers that you want to make sure that if one goes down, the other picks up, that's kind of very simple to do. If you want to do things like load balancing and sharing or caching of data information, that gets a little more difficult. A lot of large organizations use a product called F5. F5 can be, and I'll be honest, I have not seen it implemented in a way that actually works full-blown with all of its feature set to support CRM, but F5 does provide a white paper on configuring their solution to provide the full feature set of its load balancing product. It does load balance, fault tolerance, failover, as well as traffic caching or memory caching. It's a very important thing because that can seriously increase the effectiveness of your CRM system when you're actually truly load balancing, and we're not taking a hit on any one server for any of the pieces. The issue with F5 is it is complex to set up. The white paper does not really cover what's needed for 2013 or 2015 to get it working correctly, and that really has to do, I think, with the upgrades to IIS. There are a number of people out there that have not had this work. I was at a very large organization. We were still struggling with it. Last week, it was an organization upgrading from actually 2011 to 2013 to 2015, and realized that load balancing is involved, and it's not really it's with F5. It's easy to set it up for fault tolerance, so failover. I can have one server kick up when another one fails. Getting it set up the other way is very complex. I'm actually working with a former coworker who works for a large government organization where it actually is working in a highly secure environment to do a brain dump to kind of figure out how they got it working, because I've worked with Microsoft and F5 consultants on site, and we've not been able to get the full feature set turned up. So red flag number one, F5 is going to take some effort. Other areas, firewalls. So you need to be cautious because CRM uses that entire stack, that internal firewalls or network segments can cause some conflicts and issues. Network segmentation and or server zoning, where you have your servers in multiple regions and stuff like that, can cause problems. Big problems are latency. Other problems are hops. One of the things that you may see is when you do a CRM installation is that you'll occasionally get this message saying that you need to create an SPN, service principal name, even though you set up your users correctly, your service accounts correctly, and they all have the correct rights and stuff like that. Many times that's actually because whatever modifications you made to those Active Directory accounts has not replicated across your network. If you wait about 5-10 minutes and hit the retry, good chance that it's going to go through. So that's one quick trick. I've seen that numerous times. Another area is SiteMinder. So SiteMinder provides you the ability to secure your content on your website as well as your traffic from your internet server. SiteMinder takes a little bit of tweaking to configure correctly to work with CRM in a expedited and speedy fashion. It normally will work as configured in most environments, but you'll get some lag and you'll definitely see a performance hit that most people won't notice. But it's a good thing if you do use SiteMinder to take a peek at SiteMinder support documents for CRM and make the slight modifications in order to support the CRM product correctly. So at this point in time, I will just see if we have any questions on load balancers, firewalls, SiteMinder, stuff like that. And by the way, yes, there will be a copy of the slide deck provided, I believe. Am I correct, Jason?
Yeah, we're happy to make a copy of that available when we post the recording.
So, good. All right. So, the next area I want to talk about is what they call enterprise solution life cycles or enterprise lifecycle management. I am a strong proponent of at least having a test environment as well as a production environment outside your dev environment. It has become such a standard practice now that Microsoft CRM Online actually gives you licenses or a free what they call sandbox environment for you to set up the two different environments. The benefit that they have there is that your environments are identical but sandbox there, so you know that the architecture that's being provisioned for you to use is the same, and that's ultimately important. So in a normal environment, and this little diagram here might be a little overkill, you should have a production, a staging, a user acceptance testing. Those all should be identical in structure. If load balance is enabled and we have 2 front-end servers and 2 back-end servers and 3 SQL servers and so on and so forth, at the point of either staging your UAT, and sometimes that's actually merged together, those two functions, they should be identical to the production environment. You will save yourself a lot of time with trying to figure out strange little things that aren't working. All right. And on the other side, there's also, having a QA environment is important. Development environments, I believe, should be disposable. They should mimic the operating system level as well as the CRM and SQL levels. Actually, anywhere in the stack, the operating system and application system should be identical in version. We don't need to mimic hardware. So my development, if I'm a developer, I'm actually somebody writing workflows for CRM or stuff like that, and I want to do them in a development environment beforehand, my server that I build them out on does not need to be, load balanced with an always-on SQL Server cluster in the back end. But that is very important. That being said, that segmentation and siloing of your environments needs to move it beyond the physical layer. Many people do it at the physical layer, have dev test production servers, but they don't do it actually at the networking technology level or the privilege level. Microsoft Dynamics CRM 2011, 2015, actually 2015 has added a couple of new service accounts, or potential service accounts, allow you to set up different service names for each one of those functions and services, and I strongly suggest that you do that. It's very important that we know what's going on with this environment. The accounts haven't been set up and segmented, so in that case, I say, so I have an async service, so I create a CRM async service that I use for my production. MS CRM, by the way. I tend to put MS CRM before the names. The reason being is you may have one of those other CRM systems out there. Why, I don't know, but so just to keep it separate. And then either suffix it, either provide a suffix or prefix with the environment, dev, test, prod, SND for sandbox, so on and so forth. The one area that I do think that you need to keep, that it makes sense though, is that service account that we use to set up CRM as well as to manage the deployments across all those environments should be, and often I suggest highly, that it's the same account. So I have a MS CRM install or MS CRM deployment, and that's the same name that I use for my installations. So that's it. That's a big thing. So do we have any questions sort of on the environmental stuff? And I see a couple questions, and I will address those as we go. So what are the specific considerations for IFD implementations? There is a white paper out from Microsoft CRM on implementing IFD in 2011, 2013. So in the way of deployments, IFD deployments with regard to, I would say, the firewall, all that information is actually provided in that Microsoft documentation. I'm not going to go into that much detail here, but it's a great topic for conversation. If you want to hit us up, if you want to hit us up with a more specific question, we can probably provide some guidance as to where to look for that information. So why the same install account across environments? The reason I've done that is just out of practical experience. When I've gone out and I was at a large multinational, largest and most famous financial institution in the world, is what they want us to say. We had a number of different environments. There was multiple CRM implementations going out through the organization, but one group was responsible for maintaining the architecture. What ended up happening is it became easier for that group to share a single admin so that when they had to go and fix problems on other groups or business units, products and solutions, it was easier for them to do that. It also helped us when we did troubleshooting that we knew that this is the same account that we used for everything across all of the different parts or different implementations. So it makes it easier. It provides a single point that I know that in all my implementations, I have that base ID is going to let me get in and do what I need to do. So that's kind of where it goes, and it also makes it easier for administration. So one of the things that goes on is when you in a secure environment, when you implement CRM, people do not like the privilege that needs to be granted to CRM to exist in sometimes an Active Directory. There's rules in organizations that you cannot maintain containers in Active Directory at the application level within their Active Directory structure. Some organizations actually split out an application tree specifically for that, which is a great idea, and let the system manage the user or the application organization units. Sorry. The other thing is by doing having the same server, it's easy for us to remove the permissions from SQL Server after we've done a deployment or installation. So what happens is you elevate the permissions at the SQL level. So you reach out and enter a ticket for the SQL team to open it up to enhance the security, and then you remove it the minute you're done. By having that set up in that manner, you're able to simply, they know what the user is. They can go and pull it out immediately. Was that a security concern? I think it could be, but it was not so much a security concern in that organization because these are the people ultimately responsible for those servers. So in that group, they all had responsibility for that server set. So if one tumbles, they all fall type scenario. But I can't actually see that being a security issue. The problem is if I set up a different account for every installation user or every group, then I've got to maintain that somewhere. Which brings me to my little sidebar that I'm going to take. I'm a strong proponent also of maintaining a server set, Excel spreadsheet, SharePoint inventory list, or something like that, that details the service accounts used, the server IDs, the IP address, the host names, all of that different information. So it's in one spot that at any point in time someone can say, what is the dev server for our Happy Puppy implementation? Well, it's happypuppy.dev or whatever it may be, but I have a list to look it up, so that I consider to be quite important. All right. So I've listed the next 3 slides with big, bold, yellow numbers on them because in my experience, these are the 3 gotchas. When implementing CRM, utilize checklists. Within the implementation guide, there are a number of things that need to be done, requirements and prerequisites. Strip those out and make a checklist. Have those responsible in your organization sign off on them. And that can get pretty granular, but I have spent literally months trying to get a number of systems up because at one point in time, Group A forgot to do one little piece. So then by the time they got it taken care of, and by that time Group B had made a change to something that they had done, and we just kept going through these cycles and cycles of drama. So there is a standard checklist. Checklist should include things like making sure that the architecture is set up, that we have 2 NICs if we want that we have the memory that we want, that we have the hard drive that we need, or the storage space, going through all the way to making sure that we have the organization units that we want set up based on the security requirements of the organization, and also documenting down to the point of what are the specific rights for each user, each of the service accounts that we create, and what rights can be removed afterwards. Just indicated on there so later on we can take those out. There is a document called the Microsoft, what's it called? Security Considerations for Dynamics CRM. Security Considerations for Dynamics CRM. It used to be called Installing Dynamics CRM in a Secure Environment. Within there, it lists out each of these Active Directory service accounts that you can create or that you should create. I'm not a big fan of ever using just 1 or 2 service accounts, which you can get away with only 3 service accounts in CRM. The problem with that is when something goes awry, it's hard to track what failure is. By using individual service accounts, we know things such as, the VSS service is failing because the service account is incorrect. So that's what I change. If a service account is incorrect, I may receive other issues if I have it running for something else. These are strongly documented. Each one of these has a set of rules. So on the host machine, the application server for we'll say the monitoring service, we have to have performance monitoring turned on. That's an actually Active Directory domain group on the local machine. We also have the ability, local admin ability, so that we can update the registry settings, a whole number of different privileges. By setting these up accurately and correctly, you will save yourself a lot of time and energy. As I mentioned before, with the service accounts, I'm a strong believer of, sandboxes. Normally in my environments, it's MSCRM SND BX _dev _test _prod _UAT, and so on and so forth. Async service, is usually MSCRM _async service. Now, if I'm an organization, MSCRM async _test _prod _dev. Now, if I'm in an environment whereby I have multiple CRM implementations, so I'm let's just say I'm a large insurance company and I have, my life people using it, I have my claims people using it, I have my annuity management using it, and I have 3 different CRM implementations in my environment, I go to the point of segmenting these user accounts for those line of businesses as well. So in that case, the scenario might be, MSCRM for the sandbox. I would do something like, let's say life. So I'd say MSCRM _life dev _test _prod, so on and so forth. That way I keep things apart, and as well as if I do any kind of network monitoring, because I think something's going wrong, I kind of know the source and point where these things are coming from and going to. Some people think it's overkill. It's actually not. The final reason why the segmentation of accounts is very important is Dynamics CRM 2011, 2015, 2013 provided us the ability to segment out the responsibilities and roles of a server. I can have a front-end server set and a back-end server set. I can have an application server. I can have an async server. I can have an email server. I can have a report server. I can split those out as granular as I want. By using separate service accounts, I have the ability, and it is much easier for me to say at my async services, I split them out to an application server and I have a backend async service, and I've written some work and my async server is really getting bogged down. I can easily throw another server into that group with load balancing or clustering that will be much easier to configure because the Active Directory accounts that I'm using are predefined and they're segmented. So I don't have to go and change any permissions for the sandbox or the monitoring service, the VSS service. I just go in the async service process, give that a specific right that it needs on that machine. So I've actually provided a link here, and the links will be live in the actual SharePoint document, or SharePoint, the PowerPoint that is provided. So, sorry. Okay. So number one thing is should have been checklists. Number one thing is setting up those service accounts correctly and making sure that they're listed out on that checklist with each one of the individual requirements as its own line item requiring a check, and yes, I've done it. And my name is Henry, and I am sure I've done it. And the reason being is we will go into an implementation, and we'll type in all this nice stuff, and we type in all of our service account names, and we run the process. We've had to type in 7 different passwords, and it takes a few minutes, and bang, I get an issue with one of the accounts. Monitoring service is not installed on the server. At that point in time, I cannot just fix that. I have to go all the way back out to CRM install and reinstall. There is a way, if you're doing this often, I strongly suggest that you utilize a config file to set up and configure multiple services. So if I set up my first thing, I'm in a scenario where I have the annuity, the life, the claim, and whatever else. So I set up annuity first, and they're all happy and it's dandy. I can take a config file, modify the Active Directory groups, and add, life to each one of the groups, modify some other things, and run that install again without having to go through and doing any of the human interactions. No more next, more okay is needed. All right. And let's see. So that's my number 2 item. And then here's my 3rd item. And this, I will say, people think it's kind of a dumb one, but the best way to install Dynamics CRM is to schedule an hour's time with everybody involved in it. The infrastructure admin person who set up the hardware, the Active Directory person who configured the security groups and containers, the SQL Server administrator who's got to provide you the administrative rights to the SQL database, the SharePoint administrator who needs to set up the site structure. Get them all in the room, schedule an hour, maybe 2, bring in pizza if you want, do the install in front of them. The reason being is if it fails or something happens, they're sitting there right now, their time is allocated for them to go in and fix the problem. So we have an issue where the Active Directory account is not set up correctly. So we go in, they make a modification to it. Any modifications to any of the above things that I've listed here that you're doing during this little deployment powwow, once those fixes are made, take a coffee break because you want to wait a few minutes before you try the install again. Oftentimes, you won't wait long enough, and a right or a privilege will not be propagated out across the network correctly, and you'll click and you'll get the same error again. So then you go back and you waste the time, and then you start to kind of look like you don't know what you're talking about. So my rule is if you modify it during a powwow, in order to reconfigure, it's time for a bio break or coffee break. Come back, try it again. The great thing is everyone is in that room. If something goes wrong or there's a problem, people can talk and communicate with each other, and it gives the IT group a great understanding of what's going on. And you'll find that they are no longer either adverse to the product or afraid of it, because now they've heard the reasoning behind some of the things. Why do I need to give you this elevated privilege? Well, because we separate the servers into different roles so that we, assist the network and it makes it easier to maintain and so on and so forth, and it lets you each do your own jobs without stepping on the other one. It also brings the community together in the sense of what CRM is all about. Too many people think it's simply an application. Oh, why is it so hard to install? It's not. It's a framework. It is a complex, highly effective environment that takes a little interaction with everything. So get them in the room, buy them pizza, make sure they all have laptops and are able to connect to the resources so that they can change things. Make sure they don't have BlackBerries or cell phones in their hand because then they may text and not pay attention. And within an hour, you can be done with a CRM installation. There is no reason why a CRM installation of the OK, next, more OK should take more than an hour if you follow the prior steps. Any questions so far? Cool. So, a couple best practices. Never, ever, ever, unless you're creating a dev environment, create a single server where you have the data server and application server all in one box. The reason being is it may not have the ability to handle the load that you're creating, and it also does not give you a realistic sense of what the environment will be, even at the dev level. So even if you create individual development machines or configuration machines, because I don't like the word development with CRM. Unless I'm writing .NET code, I'm not developing. If I'm doing customizations and personalizations, I'm configuring and augmenting the system. I'm not customizing it, or excuse me, I'm not developing. Those boxes should be disposable, but they can all use a common SharePoint site for their testing and a common SQL site for their testing. If you were doing any kind of significant work and you are, building out an environment, so here's a common environment scenario. I have 2 front-end servers that we think are load balanced, but most times they're not load balanced. They're really just sitting in a fault-tolerant mode with failover. I have my database server on the back end. And my database server, by the way, Dynamics CRM 2011, 2013 supports SQL Server always-on technology. There are some tweaks that you need to make to it to make it actually work better without actually causing some performance issues on a SQL Server. So that wonderful always-on technology can be supported in Dynamics CRM. Actually works great as set up. If you tweak it a little bit to handle the way the logs and stuff are created by the SQL processes called by CRM, it works even better. All right. So we have that environment. Back to my environment, where we have the 2 front-end servers and a back-end SQL server. So we're basically sitting there with these 2 boxes, and because load balancing really doesn't always work, and people don't know it doesn't work because the testing has never done that great, we really only have 1 server, so we've wasted that second piece of hardware. What my suggestion is to always have a front-end and a back-end server. So I have IIS as my front-end. I can put that outside my firewall or in a different data, outside my data center firewall. All right. On the back end, I have my back-end server, which handles async processing and other things like that, as well as my SQL server. That division, you will find, will provide an incredible amount of input and processing speed, and it'll really make the experience much more pleasurable. I don't know if you can get pleasure out of CRM. More acceptable to the end users, which helps go a long way in getting them to buy into the system. The second thing I strongly suggest in that manner is what you've done there is you've basically enhanced your speed of your system significantly without any additional cost. You had 2 front-end servers that, because your load balance never hit that much of a, the threshold to actually kick in, if you are actually load balanced correctly, you are actually now utilizing that same box for a back end. So still 2 boxes, you're going to get a much bigger benefit. The third thing, or another area on the way of server role segmentation, is with the use of standalone SSRS. So if you utilize or do any kind of significant reporting or want to, or you have host multiple environments or organizations within your environment, split SSRS out onto its own server. Again, use the VMware server that's created for configuration of SQL servers. You will find that when you run reports in multiple organizations at the same time, SQL can take a big performance hit because of the way SSRS is handling those tenants. It's a very odd thing, but it happens. Put them out on their own SSRS server. Again, it's another virtualization or box. What you're doing is just spreading out the processing or splitting it out somewhere else. Okay. And as you can see here, I'm showing the basic role. So CRM can be split out into a full server. So everything's in one spot. Front-end server, where these items are all put out in the front end. Now, basically, the discovery service and organization service need to be put out where they can be exposed, especially in the IFD environment. That's how you'll be able to do your connectivity for third-party plugins and stuff like that, or custom implementations. The back-end servers, async and sandboxing processing, keep on one server. Email integration server. So that's the thing that's going to handle your what used to be called the email router. So the integration of that functionality and or your server-side syncing. Server-side syncing is a wonderful and incredibly powerful function in CRM 2013 and now 2015 with the ability to utilize synchronization of folders. Really, really look into it. It's great. It's wonderful. It's amazing. It does now support a hybrid of Exchange Online and CRM on-premise. So that was a big issue for a while. The only thing I would say about that is I do put the email integration server on a separate box if I can. Honestly, I usually put the email integration server on the same box I use for my deployment manager. I have one box dedicated as a deployment manager. There's a reason for that you'll find out soon, but there's going to be some changes to the deployment manager coming in future releases of CRM. Okay. Any questions on this?
Henry,
I just had a question. Yep. So I'm actually gonna do some self-promotion here. We can talk about that slightly, but that's actually going to be covered in the presentation I'm giving you. I think it's next week. Is it next week, Jason? On the data. Yeah. So that I'm going to cover next week. I'm going to give you a presentation basically talking about approaches to data using CRM as the front end for your data warehouse, whether it be storing data or consuming data. And I will talk about the caveats of CRM Online, what the problems are, and actually some of the solutions that are going to be addressed by that. And I'll talk to you about that afterwards, Jason, because we might have a guest on that. So,
all right, great. And just to let everyone else know, the question was about data warehousing and CRM.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, data warehousing and CRM Online is a perceived issue right now, and it is more complex. Again, so I'll step back to the statement. CRM Online can save you a lot of money in architecture infrastructure upfront if you are very plain Jane and not doing anything sophisticated. If you're doing any kind of integrations, customizations, or consumption of data, your costs can get significantly higher because there's complexities to it.
And we have a question that came in at the chat about installing SQL, CRM, or SSIS on one Windows server. Did you see that?
How do I find the chat questions? Oh, here we go. Question. I'm trying to find where the questions are. Q&A.
So,
ask me the question.
I sort of reposted it for you.
Good.
But let me just read it for you.
Yeah, read it for me.
It's asking, do you install SQL, CRM, or SSIS on one Windows server?
Almost all standard installations install CRM and the SQL data store and the SQL reporting services on the same box. I'm a proponent of, if you're going to use reports significantly and you want to do things like stored reports and cached reports, snapshots they call them, and or you're supporting multiple organization records, it is very important that you split it out on a separate server. Running certain reports where you have sub-reports and things like that can bog down the data store, the data server, and you don't really want to do that. So split it out on its own server. In some environments where you're also doing integration using SQL integration services, have your SQL data store, always on data warehouse model, and then split out a box that does the secondary SQL functions. SQL integration services, SQL reporting services, and SQL Analytics, if you use that. Put them out in their own box. It just makes it much easier, and you won't affect anyone with maybe a report that runs awry. That's my suggestion on that one. All right. This next slide I'm talking. Did that answer the question? I hope. Good. So the next slide just kind of talks about what that standard user required has, or standard setup user has. So here's the reason why I like one user, because these rights here, be a member of the local administrator group and local machine, have rights to the local program file, be a member of this group, and more importantly, have sysadmin membership on SQL Server. I can set up either a group policy that strips all of these from that user every evening so that there's no chance that by mistake that right and privilege was left on a server, but also I can have those removed when I'm done doing a new deployment or an installation, so that I'm not violating any policies about the ability to write to local machines or having local admin access on a machine. It lets the CRM implementation user follow your standard security procedures after you've done an installation. All right, so some common error messages. A lot of people are stumbling recently in Dynamics CRM installs when they come up with the encryption warning message. So basically it says encryption service will be turned on next time you do it. That is a yellow triangle with a warning sign with a little exclamation point in it. Ignore it and carry on. I've actually watched someone in a presentation where I was off-site and they were on-site doing an installation, and I'm not going to tell you who they work for, but they work for a software publisher that saw that message and would back out of the installation and see what the problem was by running a diag tool. That's just the system telling you that you have the ability to turn on encryption at the IIS level if you wish to. All right. Other error messages that you see often is this one here is this volume shadow copy service operations. So this is actually a privilege that the VSS service account needs to have, not on the application server, but on the SQL server. And the reason being is volume shadow copy is the service that takes snapshots, uses shadow copies for data integrity. That needs to be turned on because CRM now takes advantage of that. big issue there is that many people think that this needs to be done on the application server, so they provide that grant, that right at the application server to try and install. It doesn't work in. Do it again, do it again, do it again. Never gets there. 3 days later, you're talking to your Active Directory people, and you're not getting it done. It needs to be done in the SQL Server. That information is in that document, the consideration for security in Dynamics CRM, but people overlook it because it's not listed out as a checklist. It's listed out as paragraphs. So this needs to be done, this needs to be done. Put it in a checklist, have it checked off. You'll be much, much more content. So my next slide is, so there's a number of TechNet articles that can help you there. We're actually kind of coming to the end of this presentation. It's about the gotchas because we've talked about a number of them. The planning of CRM on-premise installation, security considerations, that's the one I've talked about. It's very important. Security best practices, that talks about the division of the OUs and the separate containers for each deployment. A couple tools that I think you have to always absolutely have. The CRM Diag tool, which is currently available through Codeplex. It says it's for 2011. It works for 2015 as well. It's a wonderful tool to run. I actually revise all my customers and clients to, once they're completed with installation, run that Diag tool, save the report, because it does two things. It tests that everything is set up correctly, but it also gives you a very verbose configuration document, so you know how things were configured. Another thing to consider is, I just realized those slides are copied, so now I have to remember what I thought I wrote there. So give me a second here. Now, there's also the Microsoft Performance Analyzers, or Best Practice Analyzers, I think they're called now. There is one for CRM 2011. I also run that. I run that prior to an installation because it will tell me things about accounts not being correct, access to SQL Server not being right. I also run that afterwards to make sure I did set things up right. Unfortunately, it is not available for 2015 yet. It is coming soon, but we're not sure when. Another tool that I like to run is something called the latency test within Dynamics CRM. You can go to the actual website and within the tools folder, run a tool that will actually go out and test the latency across the hops of the network. And that'll let you address things if you have an issue somewhere. That'll also give you a notification, let you know if you have an issue with a NIC, if you're single nicking the device, because you'll get some latency problems out there. Very wonderful tools. I've been told that the reason the CRM diagnostic tool is not being updated is anyone who's on 2015 will now realize that in 2015, you can go in and run an analysis of your async processes. So it'll actually tell you, almost like the diagnostic tool, what the errors are, what problems are, and what the throughput is. That is, I think, a precursor to the fact that there's going to be a diagnostic tool built in the CRM in a future release. I've been told it is already in the online version for the desktop clients if you connect with Outlook Online. So, a couple other areas of little gotchas. So, there is a little issue with something called SQL reporting services that organizations will implement CRM and they can't get the reports to run. And everything tests correctly. CRM Diag tool says it's right. SQL scripting tools say it's right. Everything says it's right. No errors in IIS, or excuse me, Internet Explorer, but it's just not working. This is a biggie. The reason is Microsoft CRM supports its own report viewer for CRM. So any reports that I create in the CRM interface or pull through the CRM interface, unless I specifically code within that report, and I say code only that I go into the report writer and make a modification, they will always try and use CRM filtered views as well as the CRM viewer. A significant number of large organizations block that ActiveX control for the viewer via group policy. That was a very, very long dig deep to figure that one out. Another area of gotcha is implementing CRM Outlook client in large organizations. The Microsoft .NET component for identity authentication, WIF, Windows Identity Foundation, blocked in almost every organization out there that's significant in size or follows standard security practices because it's not needed and a lot of people think it's an error. That needs to be installed and running on the desktops correctly for the Outlook clients to run, or if you install it. It will install on the server when you install the server. A couple other areas along that line is when implementing the Outlook client, you may continually run into errors and it just doesn't work, or it takes forever and a day. Two things is check your settings to make sure it's not automatically going through and tracking every one of the emails when you install a new user. But the most important thing that you probably need to check is, hold on a second, I just had a brain freeze here. When you're implementing the Outlook client is that you do not implement the Outlook client on a bad Outlook profile. So if you keep running the same problem over and over, it doesn't happen. Take the time, rebuild the local profile for the Outlook user, and then try it again. I would suggest if you've been using Outlook for a really long time before you implement the Outlook client, you rebuild everyone's profile because it actually rebuilds that index key inside there as well, and you will have a significant larger success. That being significantly more successful, you will be. So that being said, I think we're pretty much done at this point. If there's any questions, I am here to answer them.
Great, thanks, Henry. Yeah, let's make a final call for questions using the Q&A block. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that had come in. So I know you did cover one of them, which was charts that use SSRS. I think you pretty much talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just remind folks, as we do start to wrap up here, there's a survey that will pop up as you depart today, whenever you close out. Please do take 15 or 20 seconds to fill that out. We really appreciate the feedback. Our speakers do as well. Great. Well, Henry, let me just say thanks to you for taking the time to put this together to present to our audience. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really great to see the interaction and the questions coming in. There's a question on a video. I'm not sure if that's referring to on-demand videos that we host or something else, but you could find on-demand videos on MS Dynamics World if you look for the webcast link in the upper right. That will give you access to all the ones that are available. We'll also send out an alert when this one's available as well.
Good.
All right.
Very good. Well, I thank everyone for their time. Hopefully it was informative. You know, keep in mind any one of those little gotchas or those little tricks could save you hours and days. But more importantly, it saves frustration for your end users or if you are an end user, and that's the key. You know, this is a new system, and a lot of times people still have that thought process in their head that CRM is, oh, it failed, it's just, I don't need to use it, blah, blah, blah. Having it work right the first time and truly utilizing the power of it will go a long way to make people understand the reason we've done this is because it's going to work.
All right, and if you enjoyed today's session, Henry will be back next Thursday, May 21st at the same time to talk about data orchestration utilizing Dynamics CRM for a unified view of multiple data sources. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.